Seize New Opportunities. October 1988. Title footnote. This is an interview with a reporter from Economic Daily, first published in Economic Daily on October 21st, 1988. End of title footnote. Rectification provides us with new opportunities. Reporter. In interviews, I heard some local officials and people talking about that the Yellow Earth coastal area of Ningda Prefecture had failed to catch up with the last train of great economic development for various reasons. And now when they are ready to join in the development, but it is already too late. Some people, therefore, say with regret that time is not working in their favor. What do the prefecture's leaders think about this? Xi Jinping. Now, the country is focusing on rectification. And this truly does have an impact on the economic development of the Ningda Prefecture. But we also saw that rectification and improvement are similarly indispensable for economically underdeveloped regions. We used to regard Ningda Prefecture as a region at the front line. For nearly 40 years since the People's Republic was founded, state investment in this region only accounted for 4% of the amount invested in the province, and the prefectural economic foundations were quite weak. Despite the small scale of capital construction, there was overheating and disorder. There are still varying degrees of nonconformity to economic law, such as blind investment, unclear thinking, and a rush to completion. And this is an impediment to developing the economy. Therefore, we must start rectification. However, I want to stress that rectification does not mean recalling or putting an end to reform. Instead, it creates good conditions for further reform and helps the economy develop smoothly and healthily. Therefore, rectification will not have a negative impact on the economy of our prefecture, but it will provide our economically underdeveloped region with new opportunities for development. Ningda Prefecture is mainly mountainous and has poor industrial foundations, but it has fairly good agriculture, and we can say that we are in a good position to take advantage of the mountains and seas and to develop big agriculture. Now the central authorities are trying to reduce overheating and overexpansion, and are driving the point home that the entire party and country must give due attention to agriculture. These policies will favor our agricultural development. Therefore, this is a new opportunity for our prefectural development. Based on this awareness and in our overall prefectural development strategy, we are mainly focusing on developing agriculture and fully tapping mountain and sea-based resources. We want to first develop the foundation of agriculture and make good use of our advantages in 3 areas: township enterprises, forests, tea and fruits, and aquatic product production. Through the development of modern big agriculture, farmers will come out of poverty to prosperity. Our foundations will grow, and a production system suited to local conditions will be steadily established. There's another point I want to mention. The main reason that Ningda Prefecture is economically underdeveloped is because it lacks electric power and has poor transportation. Without ample electric power, there is no way we can develop industry and agriculture and open up to the outside world. We have rich hydroelectric resources here, and some small hydroelectric stations have been built. But run-of-the-river power generation is limited during the dry season. The country is currently adjusting its industrial structure and strengthening its energy, transportation, and raw material industries. So, it is a good time for us to develop our power generation and transportation infrastructure. We are currently preparing to link up with the provincial grid and develop 2 medium-large hydroelectric plants to get our power issues resolved. Transportation is another issue, as we do not have railways through the region and our roads don't meet high standards. The people can't complain of the shoddy quality of the roads. Footnote 1. This refers to the primitive construction of the roads. End of footnote 1. We plan on improving the current standards of our roads through private initiatives with public assistance. The Coastal Highway 104 will be upgraded section by section, and with key state support, we aim to complete it in 7 to 8 years. We will also focus on wharf construction and program control telephone systems with 10,000 line capacity. Building such infrastructure both conforms to the current requirement of rectification and lays the necessary foundation for the prefecture's economic development to take off in the future. We must dilute the poor county mentality. Reporter: There is truly much promise in this work you talk about, but some of our colleagues feel like they will always be one step behind Fuzhou and Xiamen and can't get excited about their work. Xi Jinping: Fuzhou and Xiamen are both in plain regions. They are also centuries-old trading cities with good urban foundations and transportation conditions. We are in a mountainous region with starkly contrasting natural features, so we cannot blindly make unrealistic comparisons with other places. I was transferred here from Xiamen in June of this year, so I have experienced this myself. What is Xiamen all about? A development zone has been set up there, and the state has made a large investment of renminbi 3 billion. You are in for nothing but disappointment if you try to compare yourself with Xiamen. Ningde Prefecture, on the other hand, has been named one of China's 18 impoverished regions. Of its 9 counties, 6 are impoverished. To be fair, life is pretty hard in some impoverished counties like Shouning and Pingnan. In other counties, they don't have it as rough as people joke about them being impoverished counties where everyone wears a suit. I've had discussions with other leaders in the prefecture, and we have learned that there are times when a foot is too short, and there are times when an inch is too long. And the pines and cypresses need not be envious of the peach and plum trees. We are not inferior to others in every way. This is an old revolutionary Soviet area with large minority populations. We are recognized as having impoverished counties and receive preferential policy treatment. On the one hand, our economy is underdeveloped. On the other hand, the state also shows its concern for the region. We must face up to this problem and not let poverty bring our spirits down. Poor as we are, we shouldn't lose our lofty ideals. We mustn't get used to talking about how poor our county or prefecture is because our county is designated as an impoverished one. Over time, we will see ourselves as inferior to others and lose spirit, and this sense of inferiority will lead to a poor county mentality. For example, people would not want to sit in the front row during our provincial meetings, would wait until last to speak, and would not dare speak in a loud voice. I worry that the badge of being an impoverished county may give some people an undeserved poor county mentality, and this will affect our poverty alleviation work. Therefore, I want to rouse our spirits and pour cold water on such ways of thinking. On the one hand, we must admit that conditions here are poor and the economy is backwards. We cannot unrealistically compare ourselves with developed regions and compete with them in the number of mega projects and in the rate of development. On the other hand, we must see that this place is like every other place in China, in that over the past 40 years, it has truly made great strides and seen huge changes. For example, there is industry where there was none before, and we have formed a diversified industrial base with renminbi 1 billion of output that mainly produces light textiles, while also featuring high-end, new, niche, and rare products. Our agriculture can hold its own against any other region in the province, and our culture, education, and public health have developed greatly. Such huge changes did not come overnight, and instead were like water droplets drilling through rock. They were achieved under poor conditions, with little investment from the state, quite an accomplishment in itself. Recognizing our own achievements and strengths can bolster our confidence and self-respect, which will go a long way in helping us steadily march down the path of development. We cannot wish for a sudden gold mine. Reporter. During our interviews, we learned that officials and the people have a strong desire to move quickly out of poverty to prosperity, and they hope that some large projects, such as railways, large ports, or development zones, will fundamentally change the backwardness of the area overnight. Xi Jinping. The three main economic topics of our prefecture are building a coastal railway from Fuzhou to Wenzhou, developing a 500,000-ton port at Sanduao, and creating the Shaqi Development Zone, which will eventually become a central city. Officials and the people urgently want to move out of poverty toward prosperity as soon as possible. This kind of desire is good, and such enthusiasm is valuable, but it is simply not realistic to place our hopes in huge projects and hope to suddenly be given a gold mine. Railways need huge funds to build, and it is up to the state planners to decide where and when to build them. That is not something we can just go and do ourselves. Of course, we can provide reasonable recommendations and work hard to promote the idea, but such a project will not be realized in the coming period. Development of the Sanduao port involves the issues of some old ports in Fujian still not running at full capacity and where limited state funds should be channeled. Ningde Prefecture is neither a central region nor a producer of raw materials or logistics center. These factors all restrict the building of railways and ports. As for turning the Shaqi Development Zone into a central city, this is no simple task. Central cities cannot be thrown up just anywhere, and instead must naturally be formed gradually through economic development. I threw some cold water on these three hot topics of conversation. That is, we cannot be impetuous and we cannot hope for sudden miracles. Instead, I believe the correct path is to start from the actual local situation, make full use of current conditions, solidly build agriculture and other infrastructure, and gradually realize development. Of course, we must actively prepare for the big projects we just mentioned, so we can do a proper job when the time is ripe. However, we cannot place our focus on things that we cannot accomplish right now. The same goes for opening up to the outside world. Even though this is located at the opening up coastal belt, its foundations are the weakest, and it has many disadvantageous conditions for attracting foreign capital. So we cannot compete with developed regions in attracting the three types of foreign-funded enterprises. Our colleagues in Pingnan County say others have 3+1 industries. Footnote 2. This refers to industries that process imported materials, process materials according to imported samples, assemble imported parts, and engage in compensatory trade. This form of international trade was developed as a business model in the beginning of the reform and opening up period. End of footnote 2. While they only have 3+1 roadblocks. With poor transportation, the path to riches becomes deadlocked. Therefore, our thinking is that we must throw our doors wide open and actively create the conditions to attract foreign investment. We should act as the local conditions allow, open up more in coastal counties with good conditions, and try not to force the matter in mountainous counties with poor conditions. We advocate real results rather than phony achievements, and we don't want to open up just to say we did it. We will develop the 3 types of foreign-funded enterprises according to our abilities, working on trade with Taiwan, using traditional ports and major coastal towns to develop trade, and working hard to create our own features in opening up to the outside world. As of now, there are more than 50 foreign-funded enterprises in our prefecture. This year, we have already completed negotiations on foreign investment projects totaling more than $10 million US. Nevertheless, the work we are doing now can only be chalked up as training for opening up, cultivating awareness, and laying the foundation for future development. Thoughts on economic development in Ningda Prefecture. January 1989. Title footnote. This is an interview with a reporter from Fujian Tribune, first published in Fujian Tribune, issue number 3, 1989. End of title footnote. Reporter. I have heard that in the 6 months since you came to Ningda from Xiamen, you have gone to the grassroots to learn about the situation, and you already have a deep understanding of the region. I have also heard that you place more emphasis on agriculture. Can you talk a little bit about this? Xi Jinping. We can say that economic development in Ningda revolves around farmers to a large extent. Farmers account for the vast majority of the population. This is a basic fact in the region. Agriculture is a characteristic and also an advantage of Ningda. Of course, the agriculture we are talking about is not a small farming economy, but rather big agriculture, in the sense of the commodity economy. In the past few years, the economic power of Ningda has greatly increased, and an important manifestation of this is the sustained, steady development of agriculture, of agricultural production, and its diversification. Reporter. I heard you talk about the concept of big agriculture, which includes your thoughts on industry. Can you talk about this in detail? Xi Jinping. The idea of big agriculture is inseparable from using industry to supplement and facilitate agriculture. First, without a certain industrial foundation, we will have no financial power to speak of. And more investment in agriculture would be difficult. Next comes the reasonable adjustment of the internal structure of agriculture, as the formation of an agricultural and sideline product market requires industry as a catalyst. Of course, industry in Ningda should follow its own path. That means we must properly manage the relationship between resource development and industrial structure. Focus on the processing and use of local resources, and develop industries with marketable products and local production advantages. The future of industrial development in Ningda lies in building a stable foundation for raw material supply, and we can't cook a meal without rice. Reporter. When we say that industry in impoverished regions cannot cook a meal without rice, 3 popular topics in Ningda come to mind: developing the Sanduao port, building the Fuzhou and Wenzhou railway, and building a central city. May I ask your views on this? Xi Jinping. I think it's good that people are talking about these three things. This shows that the people of Ningda have a better understanding of our natural environment. Of course, certain objective conditions need to be met before we can build upon what nature has already provided us with. Development projects such as ports and railways depend on macro state policies, and the formation of a central city is the result of long-term economic development. Ningda has unbalanced revenues and expenditures, and it will be difficult to try to undertake large-scale products on our own at the moment. As the saying goes, you cannot fly high without a full set of feathers. Footnote 1. See Intrigues of Qin 1 in Intrigues of the Warring States. Intrigues of the Warring States is a compilation of anecdotes about strategies and speeches given by visiting scholars during the Warring States period. End of footnote 1. We need to let more people outside of our region understand the significance of these three things, but we cannot base our future on this alone. Even though these things are possible and greatly needed, this does not mean they are going to happen. Decisions on the overall strategy for prefectural development must fully consider the national, provincial, and prefectural situations, and we cannot try to force the early realization of development goals that are unrealistic to achieve in the near future. What we must do now is focus on medium and short-term work. Reporter: what are your thoughts on rectifying the economic environment? Xi Jinping: rectifying the economic environment actually provides Ningda with an opportunity. The intentions of the central government, which is not to press hard on the brakes as some people mistakenly believe, are beneficial to developing the productive forces in regions that are economically backward. Ningda cannot afford to make unrealistic comparisons with others in terms of economic speed and size. The direction the central government is taking us in will allow Ningda to play to its advantages and make up for its shortcomings. We can use the opportunity of rectification to allow our region to realize stable, coordinated economic development. It just so happens that the central government's guidance to support agriculture, energy, transportation, communications, science and technology, education, daily necessities, and raw material industries covers the weak links in Ningda. And these are the areas we need to work on the most. We can use this opportunity of rectification to further optimize and integrate key production factors and reasonably adjust industrial structure. Reporter: coming from an opening up region like Xiamen, what do you think an impoverished region like Ningda can learn from Xiamen when it comes to opening up to the outside? Xi Jinping: the degree of opening up in one location is determined by the quality of its soft and hard environments. The practice of opening up in many locations the past few years has proven that tax exemptions and deductions are not as attractive as we thought. As foreign companies not only want to save money, they also want to make more money and be able to do business easily and smoothly. Ningda Prefecture can make great strides in building its soft environment, as simplifying procedures, lowering fees, increasing efficiency, and improving service will be very attractive to businesses. Ningda and Qiapu, the counties slated to be first to open up, should become the prefecture's trial zones for opening up to the outside world. I have especially noticed that it is critical to have an open mind. At the same time, we must avoid the Matthew effect while opening up. If we don't handle it correctly, opening up regions will become increasingly opening up, and closed regions will become increasingly closed because there are conditions for opening up, while impoverished regions lack such conditions. Therefore, to prevent the Matthew effect, we must work hard to improve the conditions of impoverished regions. Building a good soft environment in impoverished regions will create conditions there for opening up. Compared to other regions, the officials and peoples in impoverished regions must feel greater urgency for building a sound, soft environment. And I have no doubt they'll work very hard at this and accumulate good experiences in building a soft environment. This is almost the only path for impoverished regions to create conditions for opening up, and it is also a powerful assurance that impoverished regions will not fall behind when opening up is going on all around them. Of course, we must prevent the Matthew effect from occurring in impoverished regions. Reporter: Economic development requires clean governance, and clean governance in local authorities and departments boils down to the integrity of party and government officials. What are your thoughts on this? Xi Jinping: Integrity in party and government organs bears on the survival of the party and whether it will continue to win the support of the people as well as the fate of the socialist economy. Now the people are calling loudly for clean government. There are 4 phases that I think can serve as a wake-up call. The first is, if a thing doesn't belong to us, we don't dare take a hair of it. Footnote 2. See Su Shi. 2 prose poems on the Red Cliff. Source of English translation, Su Shi. 2 prose poems on the Red Cliff in selected poems of Su Tung Po. Translator Burton Watson, Port Townsend, Copper Canyon Press, 1994, page 96. End of footnote 2. To me, this is a basic requirement for party members and officials. The second phrase is, you cannot get everything you want. Footnote 3. This is based on the following line from Book 6a of the Mencius. I desire fish, and I also desire bear's paws. If I cannot have both of them, I will give up fish and take bear's paws. Source of English translation, Mencius, Book 6a, in Mencius, translator Irene Bloom, New York, Columbia University Press, 2009, page 127. End of footnote 3. We cannot think we can serve as officials and also strike it rich. Public officials cannot covet wealth. This is a fast and true rule, no matter where you are, regardless of the time. The President of the United States has an income far less than that of many prominent business people. Wealthy workers, farmers, and self-employed individuals will certainly have higher incomes than any of our officials. Any pursuit requires some sacrifice. The third phrase is, with a clean conscience, all things become clear. Footnote 4. See Anonymous from the Song Dynasty, collection of writings of famous worthies. End of footnote 4. Party discipline and national laws do not allow for any corruption or exploitation of the people. The fourth phrase is, working for the interests of the local people with each term in office. Footnote 5. This is a line from Huang Zongxi, 1610 to 1695, a native of Yuyao, Zhejiang province. Huang Zongxi was a thinker and historian of the late Ming and early Qing dynasties. End of footnote 5. The purpose of being an official is to contribute, and when it comes to profiting, we cannot take it as our own or covet material benefit and scheme for private gain. Work for the interests of the local people with each term in office. January 1989. 1989. Title footnote. This is a conversation with a reporter from Anhui Daily, first published in Anhui Daily on January 18th, 1989. End of title footnote. Bridges and paths. The main responsibility of leaders is to resolve problems of bridges and paths. The bridges refer to building bridges that serve as channels for the people to develop commodity production. For example, leaders should make reasonable arrangements for the regional economy and provide correct guidance and effective services. This is not enough, however, as we must also focus on clearing some of the misconceptions among the people that arise from reform and opening up and straightening out certain relationships. For example, the third plenary session of the 13th CPC Central Committee proposed the principle of rectification and correction, and many people believe that this is a sign of slowing down or bringing to a halt of construction and reform. This is caused by people not understanding the spirit of the third plenary session from a positive angle. Just as improving traffic order and repairing road surfaces are meant to let vehicles pass through more quickly, rectification is meant to create the necessary conditions for furthering reform. This demands that we both look to the big picture and take the local situation into consideration. We can neither say we are exempt from following the Party Central Committee's principles due to our special circumstances, nor expect rigid uniformity. Therefore, we should clean up disorder where it appears, never let the economy get too hot or too cold, protect or apply pressure when necessary, and facilitate and control where appropriate. All of this is part of the effort to drive healthy, stable economic development. This is what we mean by resolving problems of bridges. Paths refer to determining the path of local economic development, which must be done in light of the overall plans of the central and provincial authorities while considering the greater background and prerequisites of the entire task at hand and the actual local situation. Ningde Prefecture is an old revolutionary base area inhabited mostly by minorities. It is a remote and impoverished mountainous region with 913 kilometers of coastline and over 300 islands. For readily apparent reasons, after the People's Republic was founded, little investment has been made in this region, and its economy is still quite backward even today. What can we do? We must start with the actual situation and take advantage of the prefecture's geographical location. We must seize the opportunity to plan and implement a strategy for coastal economic development. We must not make unrealistic comparisons, sit on our hands, or act rashly. The key is in thriving through constraint and eventually realizing development. A journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath one's feet. Our first step must be to make sure we do what we can in the short term. This is the path we must follow. Positive actions. Karl Marx once said, "Every step of real movement is more important than a dozen programs." Footnote 2. Source of English translation, Karl Marx. Letter from Marx to Wilhelm Breck. In Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Collected Works, Volume 45, New York, International Publishers, 1991, page 70. End of footnote 2. I'm not calling for more slogans, but for positive actions. In the past, we adopted many effective measures, and just like in a relay race, the baton was passed forward, and with feet planted firmly on the ground, real results were achieved. In the past, Ningda relied on agriculture, and in the future, we must still rely on the overall development of agriculture. Developing big agriculture is an unchangeable goal for Ningda, and the basis for its farmers moving up from poverty to prosperity. In late 1985, the Fujian Provincial CPC Committee proposed resolving food and clothing issues within 3 years, and for the province's impoverished regions. The Prefectural Party Committee learned from the lessons of the poor results of free loans to fight poverty, and rallying thousands of troops to help thousands of families programs, and adopted comprehensive measures such as joint efforts throughout society and establishing economic entities. After 3 years of support, the prefecture's poverty alleviation rate reached 87.3%, and some people were already on the road to prosperity. This was the right thing to focus on and the right thing to do, so we've decided to keep doing it for 2 more years without changing our policies. We'll focus on the key points, bring our work to new levels, and increase the poverty alleviation standards and strengthen the staying power of poverty alleviation. Specific measures will focus both on poverty alleviation for families and on development of township enterprises, bolstering the power of the collective economy at the township and village levels, and aiming to have 10 model townships and towns that generate renminbi 100 million each in revenue. With a clear path laid out, the key to the next step lies in fighting easygoing pastoral sentiments and bad habits of overstaffing and lack of discipline, and promoting a work manner of taking on a full load and having high urgency and efficiency in which today's work gets finished today. I am all for daring to blaze new trails, daring to take certain risks, not simply following in the footsteps of others, and establishing a tradition in Ningda of feeling no shame with our predicament, working with iron will, pressing boldly forward, and striving for excellence. Governing with integrity. With clear work principles and policies, if we don't have good work manners and methods, it will be difficult for the principles and policies to play their anticipated role. I heartily embrace the Party Central Committee's judgment that maintaining integrity in party and government authorities directly bears on the survival of the party and winning popular support. The purpose of being a Communist Party member is to forever serve the people. Therefore, the purpose of officials is to contribute, to serve, to be rooted in ideals, and to not simply seek to benefit oneself. If a thing doesn't belong to us, we don't take a hair of it. Footnote 3. See Su Shi, 2 prose poems on the Red Cliff. Source of English translation, Su Shi, 2 prose poems on the Red Cliff, in Selected Poems of Sung Tong Po. Translator Burton Watson, Port Townsend, Copper Canyon Press, 1994, page 96. End of footnote 3. This is a minimal requirement for party and government officials. We despise those who use their own power to seek personal gain, who are corrupt and accept bribes, and who throw their weight around. Of course, governing with integrity itself is not enough. We must make achievements, be able to improve the local situation, advance economic development, and raise the people's standard of living. This is why I say government officials should work for the interests of the local people with each term in office. Journalism. Mastering the Fundamentals. May 1989. Title footnote. In mid-May 1989, political turmoil was fermenting in Beijing. Ningde Prefecture held a meeting concerning the work of the media and the fundamentals that journalists should address. At the meeting, Xi Jinping talked about the topic. Xu Yiming, a Xinhua news reporter, recorded Xi Jinping's views and had them published in Chinese Journalists, issue number 6, 1989. End of title footnote. Make objective analysis and get a clear understanding of the situation. The party needs to exercise greater leadership in the field of journalism. Our attempts to better understand the profession and improve leadership should be integrated with the current situation. Journalism must have its finger on the pulse of the times. It must recognize the tasks and responsibilities that the current state of affairs thrusts upon it. 10 years of reform has brought great success, but there are still many trials ahead. It is not acceptable for journalists to stick to outdated methods, ignore reforms, or refuse to heed opinions that are raised. They should not simply parrot the words of others, jump on ideological trends, or report without boundaries. Otherwise, things will become muddled. When considering ideological trends in our society, we should stay cool and think by ourselves, without being at the mercy of our whims. Objective analysis takes time. Rushing to judgment frequently leads to one-sided, perhaps even faulty conclusions. Some current issues have made evident that our democratic process and legal system need to develop at a faster rate. We should establish specific, rational steps to determine how to increase that rate and what that rate should be. If we think of democracy in terms of absolutes, attempt to apply an advanced form of democracy in a society that is still maturing, or skip certain stages of development, then once reasonable demands may turn into serious blunders. What is democracy? We should avoid painting it with a broad brush. My understanding is that democracy in a socialist country is manifested in a legal system that promotes the people's interests. Democracy should neither cater to the whims of specific groups or social strata, nor meet their demands. Those who go to extremes to place demands on the people in the country are really just insisting that they receive democratic treatment with no restrictions on what they do or say, and carrying no responsibilities to the government or other people. Does that sound right? Would you accept this behavior or agree if everyone demanded to enjoy this kind of democracy? Of course not. By allowing a specific person or people to enjoy this kind of democracy, not only do you lose your democratic rights, you deprive others of theirs. Imagine if people did as they pleased. Family planning is ignored, taxes are not paid, and the army and police are disbanded. Finally, the prisons are opened up, and the inmates released. Work standards go out the window. Life no longer has any restrictions. Would you still feel confident about your democratic rights or your safety? Does this sound like a good idea? Real democracy does not come in the form of absolutes. It is subject to specific constraints. At the same time, Democracy develops in stages and cannot be rushed. The way we cultivate the quality and management of our democracy must also follow specific stages. Let's take a look at our democracy as it stands now. Has it developed enough to be effective? How has it been applied in elections for village committees? Well, some places have done a good job. Villagers realized they needed to pick good leaders who would serve their fundamental interests. Other places elected clan elders or people willing to compromise their principles in order to get along with everyone else. This has paralyzed rural grassroots organizations. Therefore, when raising a question, we must keep in mind its basic premise and specific background and conditions. Otherwise, it is not possible to ask and answer a question effectively. After all, wasn't the Cultural Revolution a prime example of great democracy? Footnote 1. This refers to a political movement that was mistakenly initiated by Mao Zedong in May 1966 and ended in October 1976. Large segments of the population were drawn into the movement, which was exploited by the Lin Biao Jiangqing clique. It brought severe devastation to the Communist Party of China, the state, and the people. End of footnote 1. Instead of being integrated with science and the legal system, it was mired in superstition and ignorance. This great democracy led to great turmoil. Anyone can get a few people together to raid a home or pull together a fighting force. You knock me down today, I knock you down tomorrow. Does anyone want a repeat of this history? Without stability and unity, nothing else matters. Hence, the issue of democracy should be addressed within the legal system. Then, there is the issue of corruption. This really stirs up our moral indignation. Whenever corruption rears its head, the outrage of honest journalists and anyone who has a conscience becomes palpable. Nevertheless, we cannot let emotions get the best of us when dealing with corruption. Moral indignation is not enough. We need to have practical ways of fighting corruption at our disposal. There are people who assail against corruption despite being the beneficiaries of special privileges. From birth to death, every stage of life presents opportunities to cut deals or engage in unhealthy tendencies. Neither a stethoscope nor a steering wheel confers power, but some doctors and drivers take advantage of their positions to make dishonest money. This is a phenomenon that calls for our reflection. We should ask why, get to its root causes, and then develop some solutions. Otherwise, we are looking at the phenomenon too simply. Journalists need to keep up with the times and understand the true function of journalism. Charged with the important task of reporting and guiding public opinion, they should recognize the role of journalism as the voice of the party and the people. Our party has a tradition of using the newspaper, radio, and television to publicize the party's guideline, principles, and policies. This is a way to educate the people and allow their voices to be heard. It helps develop healthy tendencies, expose corruption and other misconducts, and mobilize the people to participate in building socialism. Our party places great importance on the deep affinity we share with the people. Ours is the party that represents the people's interests. We have no interests of our own that are independent of the people's interests. We represent their immediate and long-term interests, as well as their local and general interests. I want to be clear that the party's guideline, principles, policies, and positions fully reflect the wishes and demands of the people. Relatively speaking, people easily recognize when their immediate or local demands are met. They easily connect the party's views and positions with events that occur around them. Recognizing their long-term or general interests is more difficult, as those who are in a given locality may not be fully aware of the general state of affairs due to individual differences in education, level of awareness, employment, regional geography, age, and other factors. After all, orchid and chrysanthemum flowers flower at different times. Footnote 2. Source of English translation, Lu Xun, 1881 to 1936, an impromptu in Lu Xun Selected Poems, W.J.F. Jenner, translator, Beijing, Foreign Languages Press, 1982, page 55. End of footnote 2. Not having the full picture may create distance and discrepancies between their views and those of the party. In my opinion, journalists should focus more on serving as channels and bridges for communication. They should dedicate whatever time and patience is needed to inform the people about the party's guideline, principles, and policies. Explaining the party's positions and views will enable the people to have a better understanding of important events in the party and the country. Equipped with this understanding, the people will naturally embrace the party's positions and act accordingly. Journalism is a science with close links to politics. That being said, I am not equating journalism with politics or condoning the abandonment of journalistic truth for the sake of political necessity. Instead, I am encouraging the media to be more invested in the party spirit as they uphold their journalistic standards. Now is a critical time for the country's reforms. People's thoughts and sentiments vary greatly, and friction of interests among social groups occurs frequently. How do we settle these issues? It is imperative that we bring into full play the role of the media in publicizing the reforms and the party's policies. The reforms are a great social practice. In order to ensure they remain on track and develop properly, the media need to communicate the principles and policies of our party and government with accuracy and timeliness. Report on the course of their implementation, and urge all levels of party organizations and the government to promptly correct any errors. When confusion exists about certain issues, the media should provide guidance to clear up any contradictions. They should promote communication among the party, the government, and the people, and try to bring different sides together. The media should also direct their efforts toward enhancing people's understanding and support of reforms, encouraging them to think and act in accordance with one central task, two basic points. Footnote 3. One central task, two basic points are the basis of the party line to guide policy making during the primary stage of socialism. One central task refers to economic development. Two basic points refers to the four cardinal principles and the reform and opening up policy. End of footnote 3. And guiding them to realize the four modernizations and revitalize our economy and society. Footnote 4. This refers to the modernization of industry, agriculture, national defense, and science and technology. End of footnote 4. I commend journalists for the great contributions they have made to the success of the reform and opening up over the past decade. They have worked hard. Journalists play a key role in establishing the party's political advantage. The ability to promote our work through journalism demonstrates leadership and a modern way of work. Relations between leaders and the people can be categorized into the mystical and the open. Mystical relations are often associated with feudal, closed, or backward societies. Leaders who have open relations with the people tend to be in societies that are progressive and culturally advanced. Party committees at all levels in our prefecture must attach importance to the role of the media and strengthen their leadership of it. Guide public opinion and foster healthy tendencies. Guiding public opinion and playing a watchdog role are two major functions of socialist journalism. Guiding public opinion refers to using news reports to foster healthy social tendencies. When I say foster healthy tendencies, I mean guiding public opinion to shore up people's confidence in reforms, tell people about the bright future reforms will bring, and encourage people to adhere to the 4 cardinal principles. In particular, we want to encourage everyone to follow the guiding principles of the central authorities, participate in rectification and correction, uphold the authority of the party central committee and the state council, and maintain political stability and unity. How can we be sure to guide public opinion in a way that fosters healthy tendencies? Well, it requires that all journalists emphasize positive publicity and master the fundamentals of news reporting. In previous years, there was a saying among the media people that achievements won't evaporate when nobody talks about them. Clearly, this idea does not present the full story. We have achieved a great deal over the past decade of reform. This constitutes the main part of our work, and our success has been recognized worldwide. Publicizing the news requires a down-to-earth approach in which journalists report on our achievements with confidence, helping to make the party more cohesive and enhance government authority. These are important points for journalists to keep in mind. They need to grasp the essence of things, report on the dominant trend of issues, and take on the role of fostering healthy tendencies. When reporting on difficult issues or hot-button topics that attract great interest, the media should explain the nature of these issues to the public within the context of the achievements brought about by 10 years of reform. The media should guide the public to help them understand that these issues are occurring during the period of crossover in which the old system is being replaced by a new one, and there are deficiencies in our democracy and legal system. In time, these issues will be reduced or eliminated completely with further reforms, socialist intellectual and cultural progress, and the development of democracy and rule of law. While improving their guidance of public opinion, journalists also need to exercise their role as watchdog. This role is vital to the building of the party and democratic politics. Corruption is inevitable when those in power are not subject to constraints or supervision. Whether we can curb corruption concerns the survival of our party and the success of our socialist cause. Curbing corruption requires establishing a variety of monitoring mechanisms. The media's role as watchdog is the most open, extensive, and predominant way to monitor those in power. When emphasizing the building of the party and the fight against corruption, it is crucial that we help the media exercise their role as watchdog so that corruption can be exposed. The government and party organizations should encourage journalists to report on the bad as well as the good. We should wield this weapon of supervision to expose various forms of corruption and criticize problems that exist in our work. Leaders at all levels of the party and government should approach the media's role as watchdog with the proper attitude. We need to be open-minded and refrain from demanding perfection of the media. We should befriend journalists, value their support for the work we do at the local level through their role as watchdog, and create a favorable political environment for their work. When the media's watchdog role is used as a weapon, it must be wielded with a strong sense of social responsibility and an understanding of the effects it will have on society. It should be used to promote a political environment that is stable and unified, encourage reform and opening up, and help the party carry out its work. The media should take an active and constructive role in monitoring the party and the government. They should focus on gross violations of party and government policies and major issues that affect society. They can maximize their efforts by highlighting the most representative cases. Journalists should expose the facts and strive for accuracy. They should adopt a cautious approach when leveling criticism against party committees and government, and guard against first impressions that may cloud their judgment. Journalists should conduct in-depth investigations and listen to multiple parties in order to draw conclusions that tally with the facts. However, it is important that the media refrain from directing criticism at those issues that are difficult to resolve in the short term due to current limitations. Instead, journalists should inform the people about the steps the party and government are taking to overcome difficulties and resolve issues. Enhance the ranks of journalists. Journalists should have a strong sense of social responsibility. We should be clear that news agencies and journalists work for the party and the people. Regardless of time or place, they have a duty to the party, the people, and the undertakings of reform and opening up. They need to remember the media's effort on the general public and learn to overcome one-sided reporting. To perform their job well and write solid reports, journalists need to be earnest learners and have a deeper understanding of policies and theories. The development of the commodity economy has created a more colorful world that demands the media to have enough discernment to see past the surface and get to the heart of matters. This can only be done when journalists are well versed in policies and theories, knowledgeable about the law, and familiar with the rules of the commodity economy. This requires that every journalist is a person of principle who is capable of rational analysis. In short, journalists need to demonstrate a higher political caliber and a stronger knowledge base. Continuing to work diligently in spite of difficulties must become second nature to journalists. They should uphold the party's traditions of going deep into the realities of life and conducting investigations and research. The quality of their writing depends on their ability to delve into social realities and carry out thorough interviews. Some journalists in our region have been producing slipshod work, lounging in their offices, thinking up ideas. They base their reporting on information from bulletins or meetings. On the occasional trip to the countryside, they never do more than skimming the surface of things. A survey of news reports on the radio and in the newspaper makes it clear that very few offer quality, in-depth reporting. There are a multitude of good stories that never see the light of day because journalists do not put enough effort into exploring social realities. Knowing how to investigate and do research is a basic skill and path to success for journalists. Only by exercising this basic skill will journalists develop into competent professionals who think in the correct way and do solid work. Journalists should be self-disciplined and adhere to professional ethics, yet we know that the practice of buying journalists is not unheard of in some places. This is entirely incompatible with their code of professional ethics. While only a minority engages in this type of behavior, it erodes the trust and respect that people have for the profession. Journalists are charged with the sacred duty of informing and educating the people. Those who want to educate others must first be educated themselves. They must be disciplined, honest, and fair, whether it is political integrity or professional ethics. Journalists must hold themselves up to a higher standard. Journalism is a noble profession. It demands that journalists conduct themselves with dignity, have a high sense of self-respect, and always strive to do better. It is my hope that journalists will improve their professional standards and develop a good work manner. Correctly manage 6 relationships in Ningda's economic development. February 1989. Title footnote. Originally published in Fujian Tribune, May 1989. End of title footnote. Many factors have contributed to poverty in Ningda Prefecture, and it is our main duty to bring the region out of poverty toward prosperity. The coastal geographic environment, easing of cross-strait relations, and adopting of the opening up policy have brought new challenges to Ningda in implementing a coastal development strategy. The dual task of poverty alleviation and coastal development strategy has made the work in Ningda more significant and more difficult. Since the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, there have been huge changes in Ningda's economy. Such changes are not dazzling short-term changes, but rather changes that have taken place gradually, accumulatively, thanks to the determined efforts of all the people in the region. Such changes are a transition from quantity to quality and have the effect of water droplets drilling through rock. Future development in Ningda not only requires the spirit of arduous struggle, but also requires finding the path of economic development that most suits Ningda. I call the guiding thoughts behind this methods that suit the location, categorized guidance, acting within our means, sparing no effort, and focusing on the benefits. To follow these guidelines, we must properly manage 6 relationships in the economic development of Ningda. 1. The relationship between long-term objectives and short-term planning. Economic development requires a combination of long-term objectives and short-term planning. But while managing this relationship, it is tempting to seek quick results in economically underdeveloped regions. If we only pay our attention to projects whose conditions for accomplishment are not available in the short term, and overlook the importance of timing and proper steps, then we will lose all short, medium, and long-term objectives. When I started working in Ningda last year, I frequently heard 3 topics of discussion. Develop Sanduao, construct the Fuzhou-Wenzhou Railway, and build a central city. The fact that people all over this region were discussing these topics shows, in my opinion, their strong desire for change, and increased ability to recognize the issues. I have tried to lower people's expectations toward these three things because I want to emphasize the relationship between long-term objectives and short-term planning entailed in them. In the preface to a contribution to the critique of political economy, Karl Marx said, "Mankind thus inevitably sets itself only such tasks as it is able to solve, since closer examination will always show that the problem itself arises only when the material conditions for its solution are already present, or at least in the course of formation." Footnote 1. Source of English translation: Karl Marx, A Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, Part 1, in Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Collected Works, Volume 29, New York, International Publishers, 1987, page 263. End of footnote 1. Major development projects, such as port and railway construction, that can easily involve hundreds of millions of yuan in investments, rely on macro policies at the national level. The formation of central cities is the result of long-term economic development. Ningde runs a large deficit, which makes it difficult for us to undertake such projects that require enormous investment on our own. This year and next, the country will be focusing on rectification, which means credit and money will be tight, and large-scale investment in Ningde will be impossible. Therefore, the right attitude should be to recognize the three main objectives and actively publicize and make preparations for them. We must study future development strategies, but they should be based on a profound understanding of the situation at the prefectural, provincial, and national levels. And we should use this understanding to formulate an ambitious overall strategy. We should only look to carry out work that is feasible, and our long-term objectives must be gradually realized in concrete steps. We must both avoid pushing for unrealistic early achievement of long-term objectives and prevent oversimplification of short-term planning. 2. The relationship between the rate of economic development and economic benefits. Speed and benefits are opposing goals that are difficult to reconcile, and it is hard to find the right midpoint between the two. I believe that we should try to coordinate speed of development and economic benefit in order to gain greater benefits. Try to hurry, and you accomplish nothing. Footnote 2. Source of English translation: Confucius, Book 13, in the Analects of Confucius. Translator: Burton Watson, New York, Columbia University Press, page 91. End of footnote 2. We should see that pursuit of high speed often excessively squeezes resources, giving the overall economy no room to breathe, and excessive speed has a destructive effect on the development of the productive forces. We stress putting economic benefits first for two reasons: to check inappropriate speed of economic development and to take into consideration the realities of Ningde. This region has weak foundations and cannot take excessive strain, and we must make sure projects of hundreds of thousands of yuan and above will be successful. Ningde has limited investment channels, so we must pay attention to steering investment towards projects that deliver benefits. Ningde has low levels of management skills, and its product, profit, margin, and contribution to tax revenue are below provincial averages. Currently, 1/3 of its production capacity is not up to full speed. Therefore, there is still ample room for greater benefits through increasing production quality and efficiency and tapping new potential. On the other hand, we should see that even though Ningda has made great achievements these past few years, its main economic indicators are still falling proportionally when we look at the entire province. Therefore, suitable development speed is still necessary. This can keep us from falling further behind in the entire province and the country at large, and prevent inaction and failure to pursue development. 3. The relationship between resource development and adjustment of industrial structure. There are two prerequisites to properly managing this relationship. First, Ningda is rich in resources, but the development and use of these resources are determined by having reasonable industrial policies. Second, adjustment of the industrial structure in Ningda should be made primarily in light of the current state of local resources. The resources of Ningda are distributed unevenly, but the distribution of industries in the region is more or less even. In other words, the industrial sector does not match the resources, and there are no clearly dominant industries. Leaders at all levels should pay close attention to the mismatch between resource distribution and industrial structure. For regional economic development in both developed countries and developing countries, if the appropriate industrial policies are not in place, structural productive forces cannot be fully released, and economic growth will not have the speed and benefits that it should realize. Therefore, Ningda should formulate regional industrial policies to determine the optimal structure, priority, and timing of industrial development. Ningda has excellent potential for its agricultural, forestry, and hydropower resources. I believe that this kind of regional situation should be the basis for adjusting industrial structure in Ningda. Agriculture is an advantage of the region. In the past, development relied on agriculture. Going forward, we still will rely on comprehensive development of agriculture, but we must go beyond traditional farming under the constraints of the natural economy and step up to big agriculture in the comprehensive commodity economy. Although Ningda has many mountains, the foundation for the forestry industry is poor. Our forest cover and reserves are low. We should adopt positive guiding principles and formulate policies that recognize the strategic role of forestry in poverty alleviation in the region. It is worth stressing that the edible mushroom industry has facilitated economic development in Ningda, but we must properly manage the relationship between this and other industries, in particular the forestry industry. Areas with rapid development in the edible mushroom industry can link forestry to mushrooms. The all-round development and use of Ningda's sea-based resources are still in the initial stages. We should pay close attention to building pelagic sea fishing fleets. The depth and breadth of shallow sea and tidal land aquaculture should be increased. For shrimp farming, which has already seen some development, we should focus on increasing per unit yield. For high-end fish, shellfish, and algae farming, we should expand the farming area. The hydropower industry is also a major resource advantage of Ningda. I advocate actively developing hydropower resources in Ningda according to our abilities. Hydropower is a basic industry and also one with good benefits. Therefore, as soon as we have money, build power stations. We can raise funds for small power stations and seek to build medium-sized stations with foreign capital or through joint ventures. Gradually, we will form an electric power system in Ningda with hydropower as the dominant source, integrated with the provincial power grid to accommodate peak usage. We can also integrate factories into the power system to develop the metallurgy industry in Ningda. I must emphasize that one of the most basic principles of industrial development in Ningda is that development should be compatible to the capacity for self-balancing. The adjustment of industrial structure in each county of Ningda can identify a leading industry or industry groups based on local resources and productive forces. Investment policies targeting leading industries can be formulated and implemented to expedite their development. In turn, growth in the leading industries will drive the development of upstream and downstream industries. For example, Gutian has the deep processing of mushrooms. Zhejiang has pharmaceuticals. Xiapu has massage tools and processing of seaweed, nori, and mustard root. And Fuan has electrical machinery and ferroalloys. These are all promising industries. For these industries that have sufficient supplies of raw materials and ready markets, we should adopt powerful measures to grow them to achieve mass production and pursue the benefits of economies of scale. Of course, the rules of economic development show us that continued industrial development will inevitably tilt the balance of local resources, and considerable raw materials from other places will be needed. However, industrial development should still be based on the processing and use of local resources. 4. The relationship between mountainous and coastal areas in the distribution of productive forces. The dual economic states of the coastal and mountainous areas constitute a special problem in the economic development of Ningda. To recognize the content and implications of this special problem, we must consider it from different angles. First, from the viewpoint of historical materialism. People cannot freely choose their own forces of production, and all historical forces of production are the starting point for the productive lives of the next generation. Therefore, coastal and mountainous areas both have their own path of economic development to follow. Second, objectively, there are differences between the coastal and mountainous areas, and this makes it possible for them to engage in complementary cooperation. The economic development strategy of Ningda must consider how to coordinate such differences. Therefore, policy formulation cannot be rigidly uniform, and in implementation we should take into account the differences and cooperation between the coastal and mountainous regions. The revitalization of the mountain economy and development of the coastal economy are both important to bringing the economy of Ningda to a new level. This does not mean, however, that we will implement a balanced strategy in handling these two types of economies as we address regional distribution of productive forces. I believe that the distribution of productive forces should be varied. That is, we should take the path of unbalanced, balanced, unbalanced distribution of productive forces based on the reality of unbalanced economic conditions. Taking investment as an example, we should use input-output coefficients to determine the quantity and direction of investment and implement targeted investment policies. The reasons for this are clear. First, investment is not relief. We do not necessarily invest more in poorer areas. Second, within a certain period, returns from investment in more economically developed areas are greater and faster. Of course, this does not mean that there should be no investment in mountainous regions. I simply mean that there should be overall priorities, and the proportion of investment can be increased for specific investment projects in mountainous regions where the benefits will be good. The coastal region, in particular, the Fuzhou-Wenzhou highway belt, is where industry is more highly concentrated in Ningde. This region's industrial output accounts for more than 70% of the entire prefecture, and its fiscal revenue accounts for 64.8% of the entire prefecture. Fuding, Fuan, and Xiapu counties each has industrial outputs of over 100 million yuan. This is a priority area in the distribution of our productive forces. We envision centering growth around Saiqi, extending growth to the inland from the Fuzhou-Wenzhou highway belt, and gradually advancing toward the mountainous regions. 5. The relationship between reform and opening up, and poverty alleviation. I believe that for Ningde, the initial and ultimate purposes of opening up and poverty alleviation are both for the development of the commodity economy, so they should be aligned as they evolve, and the rules of commodity economy should apply to both. This alignment theory has 3 levels of significance. First, there is a certain difference between opening up and poverty alleviation. Specifically, they evolve in different forms and follow their own patterns. So we must have different policies and measures for the 2 areas of work. Second, opening up and poverty alleviation are interconnected. So we advocate approaching poverty alleviation with an open mind and leveraging opening up policies in poverty alleviation. Third, opening up and poverty alleviation rely on each other to progress. Achievements from poverty alleviation serve as a new starting point for opening up, and opening up will bring poverty alleviation work to new levels. Therefore, we must strive to maximize overall performance and benefits. Based on the above understanding, both opening up and poverty alleviation policies should play a role in developing the economy of Ningde, and the work in both areas should have its own characteristics. The national government has listed Xiapu and Ningde counties of the prefecture as opening up coastal counties. The counties that are not included in this list still face the question of how to open up, and people in these counties also need to have the notion of opening up on their minds. Ningde is exploring its way forward towards opening up, but there are 4 points that we should be clear about. First, we should not blindly follow the methods of the special economic zones and set up isolated development zones far from old urban centers. We must rely on our current cities. That is, we must build upon what we already have. Second, the practice of opening up over the past few years in a number of places has told us that tax exemptions and deductions are not the most important considerations for foreign investors. They aren't looking just to save money. They care more about making more money and making money easily. We can make Ningde more attractive to foreign businesses by improving our soft environment. For example, we can simplify procedures, lower fees, provide one-stop service for foreign investors, and prevent multiple departments acting on their own and frequently passing the buck. Third, we must coordinate foreign trade and across-the-strait trade. as we vigorously develop the 3+1 industries and foreign trade. We should also expand trade with Taiwan and bring in new investment from Taiwan. Fourth, we must combine resource development and opening up, and leverage resources particular to Ningda to increase our attractiveness to the outside world. Poverty alleviation work in Ningda has already made historic achievements, and 87.3% of impoverished households have their basic needs met in food and clothing. However, as opening up progresses, poverty alleviation work must be brought up to a new level. We must further the reform in Ningda. Everything we do must be centered on reform. And poverty alleviation work must be carried out in the spirit of reform. Poverty alleviation funds should not be scattered about like pepper. Over 90% of poverty alleviation funds must be used to support economic entities at the county, township, and village levels in order to boost their vitality. We must give priority to supporting 100 million yuan towns and townships, model science and technology towns and townships, the Spark program, non-staple food supply, and commodity bases for creating foreign exchange through exports. We must work hard to build small economic development zones and coordinate poverty alleviation with regional economic development. We must properly carry out two-step rural reform, improve the two-tiered responsibility system, further promote land operations at a suitable scale, and encourage farmers to increase investment in agriculture. A specialized and market-oriented service system for agricultural production must also be improved along with the comprehensive development of agriculture. Enterprise reform must introduce a competition mechanism on the basis of improving the contract system. We must optimize the organization of labor, strive to arrive through one continual push, and boldly advance leasing and auction reforms. Where conditions are right, enterprises can also try out stock ownership systems. On the whole, property rights relationship between the state and enterprises must be simplified. Simple, non-paternal relations must be established through taxation, and conditions must be created for enterprises to compete in the market. 6. The relationship between science, technology, education, and economic development. For impoverished regions, we must emphasize the major role of science, technology, and education, S&T education, in economic development. But due to the low level of economic development, S&T education faces insufficient funding, and problems have arisen. For example, should this sum be invested in education or in the factories? Of course, an underdeveloped economy cannot be used as an excuse for not carrying out S&T education. On the contrary, it is precisely because the economy is underdeveloped that we must have all the more motivation and pressure to step up S&T education. S&T education and economic development have a mutually causal relationship, and we cannot wait until the economy has been developed to start our education. It takes 10 years to grow trees, but 100 years to cultivate people. Delaying a few years means losing opportunities for a generation. The competing priorities of S&T education and economic development simply remind us that we must take note of three things. First, we must view S&T education from a long-term strategic perspective and see S&T education as a top priority for economic and social development in Ningda. Second, With an underdeveloped economy, we must seek to get the most from S&T education. Third, we must convert progress in S&T education into kinetic energy that drives economic development, stressing both access and the practical effect of S&T education. To every problem, there is a solution. For education, our principle is to pursue both universal education and adult education. We must especially support vocational training and rural literacy work. All of society needs to do something for education, which is provided in various forms through multiple channels. We should strive to secure basic facilities for elementary and higher level schools by 1990. Footnote 3. This refers to classrooms that are equipped with chairs and desks and housed in safe buildings. End of footnote 3. We should direct efforts to all types of training, such as practical rural technology training and S&T and management training for officials and employees. S&T should be oriented toward production and rural realities, and S&T professionals should be encouraged to play a greater role in commodity production. We must also emphasize applied S&T, leverage S&T in the adjustment of urban and rural industrial sector structures, and promote the participation of S&T professionals in the Spark program. Both sides of Ningda's fiscal economy in the new situation. March 1989. Now the economy is overheating and needs to cool off. To talk about fiscal issues at this time, I think we should focus more on talking about how to strengthen the regulating role of fiscal levers. Some may ask, in an impoverished region such as Ningda with flimsy fiscal power that is barely able to keep its head above water, what kind of a role can public finance play? Some view public finance as a money purse. In this view, when we run out of money, the purse, of course, will be of little use. But this is an outdated notion. A simplified view of public finance that we criticized long ago. Public finance is so much more than simply managing a purse of revenues and expenditures. Rather, it is a giant lever that can be used to influence the economy. This should be self-apparent. Therefore, when we talk about applying fiscal levers, we cannot simply take it to mean giving more money to a certain location or collecting more money from another location. The effectiveness of the fiscal levers depends on the handling of several relations in public finance. To properly handle these relationships, we have to apply dialectical methods, which means using the views of dialectical materialism to study and resolve contradictions in the operations of Ningda's public finance. 1. Correctly handling the relationship between the overall and local situations. In public finance, the relationship between the overall and local situations is mainly a relationship between focus and coverage. Now the nation's finances face challenges, and all levels of subnational governments are also in financial difficulties. Here in Ningda, our difficulties are even greater. In this situation, it is all the more necessary to properly handle the relationship between focus and coverage. Over the past few years, we have had good coverage, but lacked focus. The enthusiasm of local governments and enterprises for economic development has been mobilized, but macro control has been weakened. This has led to an overheating economy and unmet demand for consumption. Therefore, we must emphasize the necessity to look at the big picture. The overall consideration for Ningda must be aligned with the overall consideration for the province and even the country. If we need to sacrifice local interests for the greater good as the nation rebalances the macroeconomy, we should do so willingly. Our impoverished region is in no place to talk about making contributions to national finances, but there is something we can do to help. We should not put our hand out to take money from the central coffer for unjustifiable reasons, and when we do have the need, we should try to not ask for more than what we truly need. Last year, the entire prefecture implemented a fiscal budget management system in which each level is responsible for itself and seeks out balance itself. In principle, governments at all levels should deal with their own deficits independently rather than hoping to rely on outside help. 2. Correctly handling the relationship between fiscal tightening and economic development. Fiscal tightening will be a basic natural macroeconomic policy for the next few years. We must correctly and comprehensively understand this economic policy. Fundamentally speaking, the fiscal tightening we are talking about does not go against our goal of economic development. It is like taking one step back, 2 steps forward, or we can say that it is like crouching down while getting ready to make a great leap forward. Tightening does not mean blind tightening, but rather strictly applying controls where appropriate, resolutely eliminating where appropriate, and promoting growth where appropriate. This is called thriving through constraint and eventually realizing development. What we want to eliminate through tightening is behavior that disturbs socioeconomic order and violates the rules of economic operations. We should cut off all lifelines supporting such behavior. This kind of tightening is more beneficial to the healthy development of the economy. Correctly handling the relationship between fiscal tightening and economic development requires astute assessment of the situation and decisive action when the time is right. First, the macro policy of fiscal tightening actually provides us with a good opportunity to optimize industrial structure and to make reasonable use of resources. This is in line with the development strategy of Ningda. We certainly can concentrate on our forces and strive to develop a range of flagship products, claiming significant shares of the market and profitable enterprises that make major contributions to tax revenue. At the same time, we can gradually eliminate burdensome products and projects that hamper the growth of public revenue. Second, fiscal tightening may likely cause a short supply of capital to enterprises. This requires us to strengthen enterprise management, uncover potential sources of capital within enterprises, and grow businesses by enhancing production quality, efficiency, and technological progress. If our enterprises can improve their management levels, they not only can survive in difficult circumstances, but they can also develop. 3. Correctly handling the relationship between increasing fiscal revenue and boosting enterprise vitality. When we mention boosting enterprise vitality, some colleagues call for reducing profit turnover and taxes. When we mention increasing fiscal revenue, they think of squeezing it out of enterprises. I think we cannot have this kind of understanding. Increasing fiscal revenue and boosting enterprise vitality should be two sides of the same coin rather than two distinct issues, as the two cannot be separated. To increase fiscal revenue, we need stronger and more sources of revenue. Where are these sources? They are mainly in enterprises. As enterprises thrive, revenue streams in, continually replenishing the public treasury. As the sayings go, a rising tide lifts all boats, and there is always enough water with a big enough spring. Therefore, from a fiscal perspective, we must enable enterprises to thrive. From the perspective of enterprises, the objective of running good business is to improve productivity and obtain good economic benefits. This actually opens up new sources of revenue. Therefore, boosting enterprise vitality and increasing fiscal revenue are essentially the same. Will there be conflicts? Of course, but these are conflicts within the system as a whole, mainly manifested in the balance between give and take. Do we first give, then take, or vice versa? How much should we give, and how much should we take? When do we give, and what is a good time to take? If the government's finance and taxation departments are only there to take from enterprises, or enterprises only want more money from the government, what would the result be? The only result would be intensified conflicts. Let us share the correct approach. As we strengthen the state's ability to carry out macroeconomic regulation and control, any take must not negatively impact the enthusiasm, development, or legitimate rights and interests of the enterprises. In particular, increasing fiscal revenue must be in sync with boosting the vitality of large and medium state-owned enterprises that are important to the economy. We must take a forward-looking approach to public finance, in which we first give to cultivate revenue sources and then take, and master the art of you must first give to receive. We cannot act so foolishly as to catch fish by draining the pond. In particular, under the current situation of fiscal tightening, fiscal departments must provide strong support for industrial and agricultural development through pumping up the flow of capital. The economic relationship between public finance and enterprises is mainly reflected in taxes. To correctly handle the relationship between give and take at present, we must pay special attention to the problems of fiscal leaks and losses. Tax evasion is a fairly serious issue among sole proprietors, and we can also take a good look at the tax compliance situation among state-owned enterprises. Tax evasion is what I meant by fiscal leak. Fiscal losses mainly refer to mismanagement of give and take. If tax reduction is not accompanied by effective management within an enterprise, the enterprise will not fully benefit from the give, and the public treasury will not receive a return that is worth the give. Going forward, our attention should be focused on supporting enterprise development and production through policies, work, and credit, and not on tax reduction. For enterprises that want to make their contribution to economic development, they can do so by strengthening management, improving profitability, and working hard to unlock their potential. This is especially true when state finances face difficulties. 4. Correctly handling the relationship between getting more done and acting within our means. The desire to do something for the people is a valuable one. Impoverished regions have poor foundations and await development in many areas. Many of our colleagues want to quickly move forward with work in their region and department, and this sentiment is understandable. But there is the problem of the reasonable use of financial resources. I believe that we can get more things done, but we must act within our means. These are two sides that must be balanced on the whole, and the dialectical relationship between the two in our work calls for our attention. First, we must clearly assess the situation and make correct use of funds to do good work. When considering the amount of funding for non-production projects, we must not take the food reserved for tomorrow and eat it today. That is, we cannot finance non-production projects with debt. No matter how good our intentions are, for non-production projects such as some building constructions, buying a moment's glory with borrowed money will only sow the seeds for future disaster. Of course, for production of projects, in particular production of products in short supply, we can take on a manageable debt. We should not shy away from funding production that has a far-reaching and positive impact on economic development simply because we do not have enough resources now. Playing safe in this regard would lose out on opportunities and our own future. Second, we must economize and maximize the benefits in order to get more done. As we say, each penny helps, and every penny must be spent with care. This kind of practical spirit should be commended. To maximize the benefits means to use our limited financial resources on projects that are urgently needed for the national economy and society and produce quick results. When it comes to investment, we must consider the benefits. Investments should not be made where inappropriate or impossible. We should not invest today when an investment tomorrow will have the same result. More feasibility studies will help. Third, when trying to get more done, we should seek real results and do what is urgently needed. To get real results, we must take concrete actions and strike a good balance between short-term and long-term interests. In our long-term strategy for development, we should engage in more cost-effective projects that deliver fast results. We cannot stop our projects halfway, get involved in marathon projects, or seek undeserved acclaim. When doing things that are urgently needed, we should keep sight of the big picture and prioritize. Public funding should be first provided to key projects that are urgently needed and have major significance for developing the national economy. Opening up the economy of the Shay people. April 1989. The Shay people are the largest minority ethnic group of Ningda. With a large Shay population residing all over the region, any effort to alleviate poverty in Ningda must take them into consideration. We should recognize that due to historical and geographical reasons, the economy of the Shay people has been constrained within a narrow regional circle. It has essentially remained barter-based, and any links with the outside economy are extremely frail. One key to developing the economy of the Shay people is in opening up, stepping out of their currently limited world. Human history has always been one of development through opening up. No ethnic group can develop solely by relying on their own power. History has shown us that development is only possible through open economic and cultural exchanges with the outside world. Opening up requires first establishing the notion of a commodity economy. The economy of the Shay people requires help from outside to develop, but more importantly, requires its own internal drive. Getting its internal drive started requires turning the old concept of isolation, formed in a natural economy, into new thinking that is needed to develop the socialist commodity economy. The main goal for opening up the economy of the Shay people is to seek comprehensive development. The Shay areas have much potential in their resources, but potential does not equate to real economic power. We must develop the prefecture's natural resources to turn potential into real benefits. An important condition for resource development is market demand. When we talk about resource development, we mean comprehensive rather than unbalanced development that meets the needs of the socialist commodity market. It is part of all-round economic development. This kind of development does not simply look to economic benefits, but rather to overall benefits to society, the economy, and the environment. Bringing life to commodity trading is a focus in the opening up of the economy of the Shay people. Some Shay areas have been closed off for a long time without much interaction with the outside world, and there are many detrimental factors affecting market development. In some places, it is extremely difficult for the Shay people to engage in buying or selling. We must implement opening up policies and break down the various barriers by introducing multiple types of economic entities, exchange channels, and operation methods to the Shay economy. Opening up the Shay economy requires a virtuous cycle where commodity trade drives commodity production, which in turn drives commodity trade. And I'm positive that such a cycle can be established. Even though the economy of the Shay people of Ningda got off to a late start, is on a somewhat shaky foundation, and has more limiting factors, as long as it starts to open up, there is a great hope for continued, stable development. Forests are the key to Ningda's revitalization. Thoughts on a strategic issue for economic development in Ningda, January 1989. Here there are rows of lofty mountains with lush forests and tall bamboos. In impoverished regions such as Ningda, mountain and forest resources are an important advantage. When all the mountains of Ningda are green, Ningda will prosper. This popular saying among the people of this region reflects a profound truth. The potential for economic development in Ningda lies in the mountains, and its forests will make it thrive. What then is the correct understanding of this development strategy? I believe that in a general sense, the forest industry brings great ecological and social benefits, such as beautifying the environment, replenishing water resources, conserving the soil, blocking wind and consolidating sand, regulating the climate, and creating virtuous cycles in the ecological environment. In particular, developing the forest industry is a main path Ningda can take to extricate itself from poverty and achieve prosperity. Forestry is one of the main sources of fiscal revenue in the region and is a mainstay for developing local agriculture, industry, and township enterprises, as well as a main foundation for foreign exchange earned through exports. It is also no exaggeration to say that forests also serve as water reservoirs, financial treasuries, and food granaries. Since the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, Ningda's forest industry has seen great development. Through measures such as planting, rebuilding, renewing, and intensive management, the entire region has built more than 7 million mu of forest, mainly for timber production, but also for non-timber products, conservation, and firewood and charcoals. Footnote 1. 1 mu is equivalent to 1/15 of a hectare. End of footnote 1. We have seen some promising initial results and have begun to reap the rewards of nature's favor. But we have far more to do. Based on a horizontal comparison and looking at long-term development, Ningda's forest industry still faces serious problems. Its forest coverage and green coverage are both below provincial-wide average levels. Despite much planting in recent years, there has been more logging, resulting in a forest deficit of 300,000 cubic meters. The prefecture also has more than 3.4 million mu of uncovered mountainous area and nearly 500,000 mu of sparse forests that can be rebuilt. We have many precious forest resources that have been left unused, and we still have not tapped our mountain-based resources. As an old saying goes, we should be vigilant in times of peace. How much more vigilant we must be, given that today's reality does not allow us to have any peace of mind. We must truly make revitalizing the forest industry a strategic part of Ningda's economic development. Take the initiative and make no mistake about the urgency of the matter. How can we seize the moment and bring the forest industry in Ningda to a new level? We must first have a set of clear guidelines, further reform the forestry system, fully mobilize all parties concerned, and strengthen the ability for self-development in forestry. Focusing on forests, we must strengthen management and protection, engage in three-dimensional development, speed up forest creation, and enhance the overall benefits of the forest industry. We will mobilize social forces to develop the forest industry and closely link forestry development with food production, foreign exchange earnings through exports, poverty alleviation, and cultural progress. Based on this set of guidelines, one basic requirement for Ningda in developing its forest industry is to focus on three key areas: awareness of the situation, fundraising from multiple sources, and implementation of management, protection, and development measures. Our other requirements are to resolve two tough problems: the forestry policy system and ancestral rights to the mountains, so as to increase economic, social, and ecological benefits. With the above guidelines and basic requirements, we can draw a blueprint for revitalizing Ningda's forest industry. Work hard for 7 years to ensure the target of covering all barren mountains with grass or trees by 1995. Realizing prefecture-wide green coverage of 70% and forest coverage of 51%, an increase of 14 and 10.8 percentage points, respectively, in order to reach or exceed provincial targets. To achieve these goals, we must steadily and firmly grasp two segments. One is improving the responsibility system for the forest industry, and the other is building a robust forest management mechanism. 1. Improving the responsibility system for the forest industry. On the surface, our prefecture's forest industry has completed its three tasks. Footnote 2. The three tasks are to clarify the rights to forest land in mountainous areas, demarcate private land in mountainous areas, and establish a production responsibility system for the forest industry. End of footnote 2. But actually, the policies regarding the private use of mountains and mountains managed under a responsibility system in some regions have not been implemented properly. People still worry about changes in the policies. In particular, ancestral mountains have restricted the development of the forest industry in many places. Now we must complete the three tasks and truly resolve the problem of ancestral mountains. We must make a long-term commitment to affirming that the ownership and benefits belong to the one who builds it, and to affirming the principle of allowing transfers. While keeping mountain rights unchanged, we should allow and encourage joint interregional development. We must properly implement a goal-based responsibility system for the forest industry among leading officials. In the past 2 years, Gutian and Pingnan counties have had good results in implementing this system. We should spread their experience and implement this system throughout the prefecture at all levels. We should also combine it with the building of the 5 main bases: forest bases for timber production, oil production, quality product production, moso bamboo production, and tea leaf production. And 2 belts, coastal protective forest belt and greening belt along the Fuzhou-Wenzhou Highway in our prefecture, which are 2 priorities for the prefecture this year. These will be used as the main indicators when we assess the performance of leading officials at the county, city, and township levels. Once the goal is set and promise made, officials must follow it through, and they will be rewarded for good performance and punished for poor performance. 2. Building a robust forest management mechanism. First, we must strictly prevent indiscriminate logging and step up the management and protection of resources. We must also thoroughly correct the past practice of stressing planting but overlooking management and logging excessively, which has led to a sharp drop in forest resources. This requires managing forests in accordance with the law, promptly investigating cases of forest destruction, prosecuting criminals who destroy forests, and establishing new order for production in forest areas. Towns and villages in forest regions must formulate local rules and regulations, get the people fully involved, and do more to prevent forest fires and control forest pests and diseases. Second, we must move away from uniform operations and engage in comprehensive development. Industrial structure should be diverse to include forests, tea, fruit, and medicine. Maturity cycles should be a mix of long, medium, and short terms. Land use should combine intercropping and free-range farming. Forest structure should integrate trees, shrubs, and grass. And finally, business management should seek to align economic, ecological, and social benefits. Third, intensive management methods must be developed to replace crude methods. Forestation planning should turn from haphazard planting to targeted planting, concentrated around select catchment areas and mountain ranges. Forestation investment should move away from the past thinly spread pepper shaker method to focusing on forestation projects. In terms of forestation techniques, crude planting should be abandoned, and science and technology should be employed with a focus on the quality of planting. In terms of tree variety, the past uniform structure that mainly centered on firs and Chinese red pines should become diverse and dense with multiple layers, giving priority to trees of short maturity periods and high benefits. With reasonable arrangements, forestation planning, design, and implementation will see coordinated development throughout the prefecture. Revitalizing Ningda through forestation is a hope-filled cause. All undertakings require arduous work to get started, and this is especially true in impoverished regions. As Zhou's Chronicles profoundly puts it, it is like heading off for the mountain forest in tattered clothing, hauling a firewood cart. Footnote 3. Generally attributed to Zhou Qiuming, Zhou's Chronicles, also called Zhou's Commentary on the Spring and Autumn Annals, is considered part of the Confucian canon. Along with Gongyang's and Guliang's, it is one of the 3 commentaries that explain the Spring and Autumn Annals. End of footnote 3. Footnote 4. See the 12th year of Duke Shuan in Zhou's Chronicles. End of footnote 4. Returning to the main text. Such a vivid image aptly depicts those who work hard to initiate a new undertaking in Ningda. I trust that as long as our officials and people share the same understanding and work together relentlessly for 3, 5, or even 10 years, the forest industry in Ningde will see remarkable development, and there will be clear improvements in the prefecture's backward economy. Strengthening the great unity of all ethnic groups. Reflection on promoting the common prosperity of ethnic minorities. June 1989. Ningde Prefecture is inhabited by a large ethnic minority population. It is home to more than 100,000 members of the Shay ethnic minority, who make up 40% of the total Shay population throughout China and 70% of the total Shay population in the province. These unique circumstances distinguish the work being done with ethnic minorities in Ningde. There are many facets to our work, but one that should never be underestimated is the handling of matters that involve ethnic minorities. This should serve as the guiding principle when we ponder how to promote the common prosperity of ethnic minorities. Our purpose is to strengthen the great unity of all ethnic groups. 1. Fully understand the historical and immediate significance of ethnic affairs and the unity of all ethnic groups. Issues that involve ethnic minorities are sensitive topics that can become quite complex. Ethnic groups are stable communities that have been formed over the course of history. This stability comes in part from the common psychology that people from a specific ethnic group share, including characteristics that are expressed in their culture and sentiments that are reflected in their collective self-consciousness. In the past, societies that oppressed ethnic minorities inhibited and destroyed their ethnic pride and sentiment. This did not change fundamentally until the socialist period, when all ethnic groups enjoyed comprehensive development and common prosperity, and when the pride and sentiment of all ethnic groups were recognized and allowed to develop. People of all ethnic groups cherish the stable socialist relations of equality, unity, and mutual assistance. The state has always taken issues that involve ethnic minorities very seriously. Ethnic minorities are also concerned about these sensitive issues, including the percentage of people with minority backgrounds who have been recruited for jobs or enrolled as students, and whether respect has been shown to the customs, practices, languages, and religious beliefs of ethnic minorities. The improper handling of issues such as these increases the possibility of social unrest or even political instability. Mao Zedong said, "The unity of our various ethnic groups, these are the basic guarantees for the sure triumph of our cause." Footnote 1. Source of English translation, slightly revised here, Mao Zedong, on the correct handling of contradictions among the people. Beijing, Foreign Language Press, 1966, page 1. End of footnote 1. The history of Ningde has proven this point. During China's Revolutionary War, the unity of all ethnic groups was crucial to stoking revolutionary fires throughout Ningde. It helped preserve and expand our forces during the most difficult years. Many veterans of the revolution were saved by the Shay people, who sacrificed their own blood and even their own lives to shield them. When veterans of the revolution, such as Ye Fei, Xing Zhi, and Fan Shi-ren, were engaged in guerrilla warfare in Fujian, they often sought shelter in Shay villages in the mountains. Footnote 2. Ye Fei, 1914 to 1999, was a military strategist and statesman. Born in Quezon Province, the Philippines, his family was from Nan'an, Fujian Province. He was the only person to have ever held dual nationality and served as a general in the fight to establish the People's Republic of China. End of footnote 2. Footnote 3. A native of Yizhang, Hunan Province, Zhengzhi, 1911 to 1998, was an outstanding member of the Communist Party of China. She was a proletarian revolutionary who proved her loyalty countless times as she fought for the communist cause.